Barbados is the most powerful man in the world, but he hates it because people no longer see him as human. He had hoped to change that by losing miserably to show everyone that he's just a regular human, but there are no enemies strong enough to kill him at this age, so that plan would never work. Furthermore, he is racked with guilt over his dear friend Lydia, whom he killed, so he decides to just reincarnate himself because he is sick of his current life. However, trucks don't exist in this world yet, so he had to bust out the old rope and step stool combo to get the job done. After reincarnating, he is born as Ard Meteor, an average boy in the countryside with above-average skills, and since he is no longer the feared demon lord of the past, he is sure people will be able to approach him without worrying for their lives. However, he's pretty much a weirdo, so no one wants to talk to him regardless, so he decides to try his luck against the final boss and approaches a group of girls on the street. However, the threatening aura from those girls was too much for his anxiety to bear, so he ends up crouched over in an alleyway, and that just made him look like even more of a weirdo. He's about to give up and let them go, but then he remembers that the worst she can say is no, so he works up the courage and declares that he wants to be friends with the girls, but they all just frantically started running away from him. On that day, Ard discovered that there are many things worse than a no. Ard decides to go let out some of his frustrations by destroying part of the forest's ecosystem. And a little while later, Ard is sulking in front of his house when Allhide comes over to check on him. He asks him what's wrong, so Ard explains that he hasn't been able to make any friends no matter what he tries, and it's starting to get to him. Allhide understands that making friends can be hard, so he advises Ard that people will like him more if he is nice, and Ard takes those words to heart and goes out to try making friends again. This time he tries to show the kids how nice he is by being overly courteous and inviting, but as expected, all the boys and girls, he goes up to run away from him in fear. Ard gets upset again and decides to vent some of his frustrations by committing some monster genocide, and once he has calmed down a little, he decides to head home, but before he does, he hears the voice of a little girl in the woods. He uses magic to fly over and check on what's going on, and to his surprise, he finds a little girl in the forest fighting an ancient wolf. He wonders why she would be wasting her time fighting a mere ancient wolf, but then he realizes that she must be killing monsters to relieve stress, just like him. After she kills the wolf, she notices Ard watching her, and Ard doesn't want to come off as a weirdo again, so he politely introduces himself to her and simply asks her if she wants to be his friend. To his surprise, Irina doesn't immediately flee, so he thinks he might actually have a chance here. But a few seconds later, Irina yells that he could never be her friend and runs away. Ard is getting sick of rejection, so he chases after Irina to ask her why she doesn't want to be friends. Irina runs back to her father, who happens to be Allhide, but before she could explain what happened, Ard shows up and he is elated to learn that since Allhide is best friends with his parents, that means he has free reign to annoy Irina for as long as it takes until she becomes his friend. Irina thinks he is a creep, so Ard tries to change her opinion of him by telling her he learned all kinds of stuff about her from her father. Like the fact that she likes roses and the exact number of moles she has on her body, but that just makes her think he's even creepier. After a couple of months of this, one day Irina is out in the forest killing monsters to vent her frustration, and Ard followed her here because he wants to spend time with her, but Irina just runs away from him as usual. Since nothing has worked so far, Ard tries to think of a new strategy in his room, but that same night the village is thrown into chaos because monsters are attacking. Ard heads out and is about to use magic to kill the goblins, but before he gets the chance, his father jumps out in front of him and uses his sword to cut them down. Ard asks his father why all this is happening, so his father explains that the dungeon core is acting up, so monsters have started spilling out into the village. Just then, Allhide runs up and he looks really worried because Irina hasn't come home yet. The last time he saw her, she was running into the woods, and as he says that, Ard realizes that he's the reason she's missing because she was trying to get away from him. He wants to fix his mistake, so he immediately activates his flight magic and takes off to go find Irina, and both Allhide and Ard's father are left wondering when Ard learned how to use flight magic. Meanwhile, Irina has been cornered by a large group of sentient goblins, and they are pretty pissed at her because of all the monsters she has killed for no reason, so they're going to do what goblins do. The big one even offers to give her the chance to call for help to make this more fun, but Irina says she has no friends, so she has no one to ask for help. Thus, she gives up and starts waiting for her inevitable death. But before the goblins could do anything, Ard activates a mega barrier around her and sends them all flying. He then proceeds to blow up each and every one of the remaining goblins until Irina is safe, and afterwards he goes to check on her. But even though Ard just saved her, Irina yells at him because she never asked for his help. She was perfectly fine with letting herself be killed because she's sick of living a life of isolation and betrayal. Ard can understand the way she feels since he has experienced a similar sense of isolation, but living in the past will never get you anywhere, which is why he wants to become friends with Irina. He swears that he will never betray or grow to hate her, so she finally agrees to become friends with him, and the two have been together ever since. That's how Ard achieved his perfect laid-back life with no overwhelming responsibilities and his best friend by his side. But then one day, Irina sneaks into Ard's bed in the morning and tells him she wants the two of them to go to the Magic Academy together, so Ard's going to have to do stuff now. Ard and Irina meet with the headmaster and the school go, and you can already tell that these two are special. He heard about the way Ard and Irina exterminated a horde of goblins in their youth, so he's already well aware of their physical capabilities, which is why he is giving them a special exemption from the practical exam. However, he will still require them to take the written exam like everyone else. Ard thanks the headmaster and says he has no problem with taking the test, and to make sure nothing gets in the way of his school experience, he swears to prepare for the exam with everything he's got. After the exams, all the students gather around in the courtyard to check their scores, and Irina finds her name at the top of the leaderboard with an outstanding score of 98. However, Ard's name is nowhere near hers. In fact, he can't find it anywhere on the board, so he starts to worry that he may have failed the test. Fortunately, Irina finds his name at the bottom of the leaderboard with a score of 0, and it's good that his name is on the board, but he doesn't understand how he managed to gain admission when his score is so low. The headmaster comes over to congratulate Ard and Irina on passing, but Ard still has no idea how he passed when his score is 0. He asks if there was some kind of mistake, but Go assures him that no mistakes were made. Ard just happened to fail every single question on the exam, but that doesn't mean his answers were wrong. In fact, the way he answered the questions was so far above anything they've seen before that their grading system couldn't account for it, which is why he got a 0. The headmaster then makes an announcement to all the students here, telling them that they've got a pair of prodigies in their midst. As a result, when Ard and Irina finally make it to class, all the guys and girls begin fawning over them, all except a couple of stuck-up noble brats at the back of class. One of these brats, Geraldo, and he's busy smacking a succubus girl for daring to do better than he did on the entrance exam. Ard refuses to let such behavior go on in his presence, so he yells for Geraldo to stop, but Geraldo tells him to stay out of this because it doesn't concern him. He tells Ard that this girl belongs to a family that serves his own family, therefore she is his servant and he has the right to do whatever he wants with her. However, regardless of the noble politics involved, Ard says isn't going to just stand by and watch him mistreat the girdle, so Geraldo becomes all smug and challenges Ard to a duel to decide the fate of the girl. Ard agrees to the duel without hesitation, but Irina warns him that he might have to be careful about facing Geraldo, because even though he's an absolute jerk, he's also incredibly skilled, so he's not going to go down easy. However, before any violence occurs, the students are interrupted by their teacher, Olivia, the former general of Demon Lord Varvatos. Ard sees her and immediately starts panicking because he wasn't expecting to meet her again in this time period. He knows it must have caused a lot of problems for her after he reincarnated himself, and she must be holding a grudge against him, so he tries to do everything he can to keep her from finding out that he is Varvatos. But from that look on her face, it's pretty clear that she's onto him. She recalls hearing something about a duel, so she says she's going to let them do it, mainly because she wants to see what Ard can do. Just like that, a duel has been set up and everyone gathers outside to watch. A good chunk of the students think Geraldo is going to win the duel because of his impressive track record, but as he launches his first attack, Ard blocks it without so much as flinching. Geraldo praises Ard for being able to counter his mega flare, but Ard doesn't know what he is talking about because that last attack looked like a regular flare. Since his last attack failed, Geraldo decided to go all out and perform a Giga Flare attack, but Ard still isn't impressed because this just looks like a regular flare that's slightly bigger than normal. To call this a Giga Flare is an insult to the person who created it, and Ard won't stand for it, so he decides to show Geraldo what a real Giga Flare looks like. Ard begins casting his spell, and within seconds Mini Sun appears, and it's so hot and massive that everyone is in awe of Ard's power. Geraldo is so scared that he begins begging for mercy, so Ard decides to spare him and dissipates the Giga Flare. Surprisingly, Geraldo isn't even scorched after getting hit with that Giga Flare, and no one knows why, except Olivia, who saw the whole thing. While Ard was casting his Giga Flare, he simultaneously began casting a Mega Shield around Geraldo so he wouldn't get vaporized by the blast. Ard doesn't think it's that big of a deal, but Olivia informs him that simultaneous spell casting is a lost art that no one in this era has been able to replicate, so for Ard to be doing it so casually, there has to be something he's hiding. The only thing going through Ard's head right now is it's over. She knows. It's only a matter of time before she figures out that he's the Bay Harbor Demon Lord. But for now, Olivia decides to let it go since she doesn't have any real proof yet. Now that the duel has been settled, Ard and Irina tell the girl that she doesn't have to listen to what Araldo says from now on. The girl introduces herself as Ginny and thanks both of them for standing up for her. But since everyone in class still ostracizes her, Ard and Irina decide to team up with her for today's practical class. A little while later, class is set to go on as usual, so Olivia tells everyone that they will be required to find a wolf monster, kill it, and bring its fur back to pass. The three head into the dungeon together, but when they encounter their first wolf, Ginny gets scared, so Ard and Irina take care of it by themselves. It was easy enough to defeat the wolf, but Ard used a little too much power, so the wolf's fur was completely destroyed. Ginny is amazed by how powerful the two are, but she feels like absolute garbage since she's nowhere near as strong as them. Ard and Irina want to make her feel better, so Ard offers to give Ginny some special magic lessons to help her improve. A succubus like Ginny has a natural affinity for magic, but she has had to endure a lifetime of torment from Araldo, so the problem here is that she lacks self-confidence. To fix this, Ard decides to teach her a technique that is really easy to perform so she can regain some confidence. He created the script magic technique himself, and it basically creates a magic circle using the mana already present in the air, so all one needs to do is have the intended magic circle memorized. Ard teaches Ginny the magic circle to use, and once she gets the hang of it, she's able to take down a wolf on her own, and now that they've taken down a black wolf without turning it to ash, all they need to do is remove its fur, so nothing could possibly go wrong now. However, as they were walking towards the wolf, a trap opened beneath their feet and they all fall to the bottom of a pit. Ard apologizes to the others since he wasn't paying attention and didn't notice the trap in time, but this looks like a classic dungeon hole, so they must have fallen all the way to the bottom floor of the dungeon. Specifically, they are currently in the middle of the boss room, and a few moments later, Irina and Ginny are completely terrified because they are faced with a minotaur. Ard, on the other hand, doesn't seem too bothered by it, since it's only a little stronger than the wolves they fought earlier. In fact, he thinks this is the perfect opportunity to give Ginny some more combat lessons. For instance, as a magic user, it's a bad idea to let your opponent get close because it leaves you with no time to cast your spell, so you've got to create some distance like this, and then hit them with rapid-fire blasts so they can't counterattack. After Ard's demonstration, the Minotaur is pretty much cooked, so he tells Ginny to land the finishing blow so they can get out of here. Ginny is hesitant to do it because she has always been told she is an incompetent mage, but Ard assured her that she has the power to do it, so all she needs is the confidence to let go of the past and try. Eventually, Ginny overcomes her insecurities and begins blasting the Minotaur over and over again until it is pretty much reduced to ash, and afterwards they all head back to the surface to submit their materials. Olivia can't believe that their team managed to take down the dungeon boss with just 3 people, but the girls explain that Ard did all the heavy lifting, so they never could have done it without him. Ard tries to downplay his involvement and leave to avoid suspicion, but it's already too late because Olivia grabs him by the shoulder and says there's something she wants to talk to him about. She takes Ard to the headmaster's office, and the headmaster says he has something important to ask of him, so he tells Ard about the annual magic competition that's going to be held, and long story short, he needs Ard to win the tournament for their academy. If he wins, it'll get them a lot of extra funding, so he's really hoping that Ard will agree to compete, but Ard doesn't want to do it because he thinks it'll draw too much attention to himself. However, he doesn't want to outright refuse because he's worried the headmaster might get mad and expel him in retaliation, so he says he will consider it. While leaving the headmaster's office, he runs into Ginny and she asks him if he's willing to go on a date with her later today. Ard takes a moment to contemplate what she means by a date, and once he realizes she's talking about a romantic engagement, he is tempted by her abundant personality. However, he refuses to let himself start fantasizing about Ginny, so he decides to turn her down immediately. However, he takes a look at Ginny's face, and he doesn't want to disappoint her, so he ends up agreeing to the date after all. Ginny is really happy that he agreed to the date, but all of a sudden, Irina shows up and steps in front of Ard because she can't let Ginny steal him from her, so she says she's going to join them on their date. To Irina's surprise, Ginny says she has no problem with Irina coming on the date because she never planned on having Ard all to herself. In fact, she's advocating for Ard to get as many girlfriends as possible, but that would mean more competition for Irina, so she strictly forbids it. The next day, Ard and Irina meet up with Ginny in town, and since today is their first official date, she suggests that they should watch a play together. Ard doesn't mind the idea at first, but then he realizes what the play is about, and all of a sudden he's dying of cringe in his seat. The play is about his life as Varvatos, and while watching Ginny and Irina begin to press up against his arm, so Art has to use every ounce of will in his body to stay calm. After the play, Ginny begins leading everyone to a place where they can get some food. But along the way, Art and Irina overhear a conversation in a dark alley about some masked men plotting to harm the queen. They obviously aren't just going to let that happen, so they start chasing after the group and follow them into the sewers. When they turn around the corner, Art spots a massive magic circle on the wall, and he immediately realizes that this whole thing was a setup. Just then, more masked men appear behind them and threaten to kill them if they move, but Art doesn't seem too bothered by their threat. For one, the fact that they set a trap and didn't immediately kill them means that their goal is just to kidnap them. The leader of the masked men admits that Art is right, but they only have one target that they must keep alive, so they're allowed to kill anyone else. The man then casts a fire spell and engulfs Art in flames, but such weak spells could never harm Art, so he simply brushes it off and casts a lightning spell to destroy the magic circle on the wall. Now, whenever they were planning won't work anymore, so Art proceeds to shock the life out of all the men here until the only one left is the leader. He tells the leader to just give up now and tell him what he was planning, but the leader refuses to let this be the end, so he transforms, revealing himself to be a demon and blows a hole through the ceiling to escape. Art flies after him all the way back to the surface, and in an attempt to gain the upper hand, the demon takes a little girl hostage. However, when Art arrives, he simply uses a little illusion magic to get the girl to safety, and then proceeds to vaporize the demon. As a result of Art's heroic deeds, he is later summoned to meet with the queen so she can reward him. But Art isn't sure how he should approach this audience, since this is his first time meeting royalty as a commoner instead of the Demon King. He does his best to treat the queen with the proper respect, but Irina, on the other hand, couldn't care less about respecting the queen, since the two of them happen to be old friends. Everyone in the throne room is outraged that Irina would dare to act so informally in the presence of the queen, but Rose tells them to quiet down because Irina is an old friend of hers, so she's permitted to act however she wants. Rose is glad to see that Irina is still the same as ever, but moving on, she now wants to discuss Art's reward. Something as heroic as slaying a demon deserves adequate compensation, so as such, she asks Art to become her husband. Art as well as everyone else are stunned in silence because they can't believe what they just heard, so Queen Rose clarifies that she just wants Art to put a baby in her. Irina absolutely refuses to let that happen because if Art is putting a baby in anyone, it's going to be her first. Rose can see that Irina is upset, so she says it's just a prank bro, and says she'll reward Art with something else. She declares that she will grant Art the rank of a 5-point mage, but that title is a major deal and would draw a lot of attention to him, so Art declines and says he wants something else instead. He tells Rose he would rather just have her increase the budget of the academy, and she agrees, but she's still going to give him 5-star mage status though. After Art's recent spike in recognition, he has become a lot more popular with the ladies to the point that a girl randomly offers to throw it back on Art behind the school. Irina obviously doesn't let that happen and scares the girl off, but for some reason she's also mad at Art now and he can't figure out why. Meanwhile, in the headmaster's office, he is talking with Professor Jessica about the recent events involving Art, and while he is glad that he convinced the queen to increase the school's budget, he is also disappointed that Art won't be participating in the tournament. He had hoped to use it as a means to prove Art's skill so he can officially hire him as an instructor, but they're going to have to think of something else. Later that night, Art is lying in bed and still wondering why Irina got mad at him when all of a sudden there's a knock at his door and it turns out to be Ginny in a nightgown. She heard about what happened earlier today, and while she doesn't mind other girls trying to seduce Art, she also doesn't want to fall behind, so she decided to try her luck with him as well. Art would have normally shrugged her off immediately, but Ginny uses her succubus charm, so Art is stiff as a board and he also can't move. Ginny is about to hit first base with him, but all of a sudden Irina bursts into the room. She had come here to apologize for getting mad at Art earlier, but now she's mad at him for a different reason. Ginny tells Irina to calm down, but Irina is mad at Ginny too, because it's her fault that Art is getting so much attention since she's been advocating for a harem for Art, so she's starting to fall behind. Ginny tells her it's her own fault for not being more assertive, and from there, Irina challenges Ginny to a duel over Art. Ginny is confident that she can win, so she even adds a condition and says the loser will have to run across the school naked. Both of them were fully committed to the terms of the duel, but Art refuses to let them lose their dignity over such a trivial matter and demands that they both sit down and discuss this like reasonable adults. Both Irina and Ginny realize they were being a bit childish and apologize to each other. But just then, Professor Jessica busts into Art's room and says she has the perfect solution to their dilemma. Since Ard won't let them have a duel, she suggests that they should enter the battle tournament and make it to the finals so they can have an official fight. This way, they will be able to settle their differences. Plus, if Ard trains both of them and they perform exceptionally, then it would prove that he has what it takes to be an instructor at the academy. Both Irina and Ginny end up agreeing to the idea. However, Ard doesn't want to have to become an instructor, so on the day of the tournament, he's slightly hoping they both lose. Unfortunately for Ard, both Irina and Ginny blow through the competition with ease, so they both end up making it to the finals and face off against each other. Ard's parents and Irina's father are all here as announcers for the fight, and they are excited to see what these two can do after learning from Ard. But before the match could begin, chaos erupts as several demons are spotted in the crowd and begin destroying everything. Just then, Professor Jessica shows up and says they need to subdue the demons, so she tells Ard and Olivia to go off by themselves while she takes both Irina and Ginny. Meanwhile, Irina and Ginny are doing their best to fight off the demons that are attacking them, but all of a sudden, a giant golem is summoned, and they'd have a lot of trouble dealing with something like this. Luckily, Irina's father steps in and saves them by destroying the golem with one of his wind spells, but while he's distracted, he gets stabbed through the back by Jessica. Irina and Ginny can't believe their professor would do something like this, but it is revealed that Jessica was never really their teacher. She has been a demon named Elzard the entire time, and this whole thing was an elaborate plot to capture Irina, so she grabs her and flies away. Allhide later wakes up in the school infirmary, so Ard asks him what happened to Irina, and he tells him that she was abducted by Dragon Lord Elzard. She is the same one who nearly destroyed the world thousands of years ago, so her strength is on par with that of the evil gods. However, Ard doesn't care how strong she is or why she chose to attack. All that matters to him is that she took Irina, so he's going to get her back. Allhide thinks it's too dangerous to go after Elzard, but since Ard is so insistent, he decides to let him handle it, and to help his rescue mission, he gives Ard full access to the royal treasury. Meanwhile, Irina wakes up bound in a magic barrier, and Elzard tells her that she's about to begin the ritual. Irina asks why Elzard is doing this, but it's pretty obvious since Elzard is after the eagle god blood that runs in her veins. Irina is shocked that Elzard discovered her secret, and Elzard intends to use Irina's blood to summon the evil gods by feeding her to this monstrosity over here. Irina yells that Elzard won't get away with this since Ard will surely come to save her, but Elzard isn't too worried because even if Ard is strong, there's no way a mortal like him could ever defeat her. And even if he does show up to try and save her, Elzard asks if he will still consider Irina a friend after he finds out what she truly is. Irina can't argue with that, since in all the time she's known Ard, she's always kept her origin secret, so she doesn't know how he will react if he finds out that she's a descendant of the evil gods. Elzard finds the look of despair on Irina's face to be hilarious, so she starts the ritual and is about to have the Orphan of Chaos eat Irina. But before it does, it gets incinerated by Ard. Irina is one of the people Ard cares for most in this world, so he won't let Elzard get away with this. Elzard mockingly tells him he isn't as close to Irina as he thinks, because she never told him the truth about herself and how she's a descendant of evil gods. But even if that's true, why would Ard care in the slightest? Her origins change nothing about who she is, because to Ard, she will always be his best friend. However, hearing Ard's genuine feelings makes Elzard sick, so she plans to wipe both him and Irina off the face of the earth. Elzard reveals her true dragon form and launches a blast at Ard and Irina, so in response, Ard puts up a barrier and starts a chant to summon his ultimate weapon. This is a sword he created with the remnants of Lydia's soul, and with it, Ard plans to slay Elzard once and for all. Elzard feels insulted that a mere mortal thinks he could defeat a great dragon like her, but Ard is no mere mortal. He reveals his true form to Elzard and tells her that he has analyzed every part of Elzard, her fighting style, her magic, and even her reasons for doing all of this. He understands that Elzard was pushed into isolation by the current peaceful state of this world, and she brewed to despise it, but she made the fatal error of targeting Ard's friend, and that is truly unforgivable. Elzard refuses to accept that she is outmatched, so she begins changing up her dragon's breath, and in response, Ard begins charging up his ultimate attacks. With the two spells clash, an incredible explosion occurs, but Ard remains perfectly safe while Elzard meets a gruesome end, and now that the fight is over, Ard goes back to the ground to check on Irina. He asks her if she still wants to be his friend after witnessing the frightening power that he possesses, but Irina would never fear Ard for his strength, so she tells him he doesn't need to worry about that. Ard is relieved to hear that, so he tells Irina to come with him so they can go back home. Deep inside a dungeon, a girl named Sylphie has been working hard to train her body for war, and once she's satisfied with her strength, she decides to return to Lydia and the others. However, before that, She really needs to go take a bath since she hasn't had a shower in the past 3 years of her training. She heads outside, but to her utter shock, she finds an entirely different world, and she doesn't understand how things could have changed so much when only 3 years have passed. She ducks into an alleyway to avoid all the oncoming traffic, and there she meets a strange masked man. The man seems to know who Sylphie is, so he commends her on her absolute dedication because not just anyone could spend 3,000 years doing nothing but training. Sylphie is taken aback and asks if she heard the man wrong because it sounded like he said she was gone for 3,000 years instead of 3, but there was no mistake with what he said. The dungeon she was training in had special time laws, so 3,000 years really have passed since she entered. Sylphie can't believe she really spent that long in the dungeon, so she starts asking the man if he knows what happened to Lydia and the others. He tells her that if she's looking for answers, then she would be better off asking Demon Lord Varvatos himself. And as luck would have it, he seems to have reincarnated into this generation under the name Ard Meteor, and is currently studying at the Magic Academy. Meanwhile, Ard and the others are having a meeting with the headmaster because he has something to ask them. The school festival is coming up soon and he would like Ard and his friends to put on something like a play. He doesn't really care about the play, but he needs Ard to participate in something since the school received a threatening letter from someone named Al Ghul, and he would feel much more secure if they had Ard around to make sure everyone is safe. To get close to him, Sylphie enrolls as a student at the academy with the help of Olivia, since they are friends, and as soon as she spots Ard, she immediately starts calling him the Demon Lord and asking what happened to Lydia. Ard tries to deny being the Demon Lord, but Sylphie isn't going to be fooled since she has irrefutable proof that Ard is the Demon Lord. Ard has no idea how Sylphie managed to find out about his secret, but her scene here is drawing too much attention. And at this rate, Olivia and the others are going to figure out that he really is the Demon Lord, so he tries to convince her that she must have the wrong person here, but she isn't backing down. Just then, Irina gets up and starts yelling at Sylphie for talking to Ard in such a rude manner, and normally, Sylphie would have immediately resorted to violence and drop-kick Irina through the wall, but Irina looks a lot like Lydia, so Sylphie takes a liking to her. Although, she still doesn't like Ard because he keeps lying to her, so she challenges him to a duel so she can force him to admit that he's the Demon Lord. Everyone gathers outside to watch as the duel unfolds, and Ard is trying his best not to overdo it, so Olivia doesn't figure out his identity, so he attempts to put an end to the match quickly by taking advantage of one of Sylphie's bad habits. Back when he was the Demon Lord, whenever he would fight with Sylphie, she would always lean too far to the right and leave herself wide open, so Ard attempts to stab her in her side. However, all that training Sylphie did in the dungeon really paid off because she managed to counter and put pressure on Ard. Ard admits that Sylphie has grown stronger since the last time he saw her, but she's still not strong enough to beat him, so he shatters her sword and knocks her away, making him the winner of their duel. However, Sylphie refuses to accept her loss, so she tells Ard to run it back because she's not going to pull her punches anymore. She then summons her legendary sword, and Ard tries to tell her that it's not a good idea to use it here, but it's already too late because she's unleashed a devastating slash. He manages to block it, so he is perfectly unharmed, but the same can't be said for the school building or the spectators. Olivia then yells at Sylphie for being careless because that sword she just used spreads poisonous mana with every swing, so she nearly wiped out all her classmates with that last attack. Sylphie realizes she may have made a mistake, but she argues that Ard did a lot worse when he was the Demon Lord, so this isn't that big of a deal. However, Irina gets mad and tells her she should at least apologize for nearly killing them, and since Irina reminds her of her role model Lydia, Sylphie apologizes and breaks down crying because she doesn't want Irina to be mad at her. Sylphie promises not to cause any more trouble, so class goes on as usual, and the agenda for today is the upcoming festival. Ard wants everyone to agree on a theme for their play, so he suggests they base it on one of the historic battles held by the Demon Lord. No one else has any better idea, so it looks like the theme of their play has been decided, but there's still more to discuss since their class needs to set up an attraction for the festival. Ginny says she has an idea and suggests that the class put together a maid cafe. She even went to the liberty of creating some maid outfit designs ahead of time, and on paper the idea of a maid cafe sounds promising, but when Ard and the others see those designs, they immediately reject it. Ginny's outfits designs are borderline age restricted, so none of the girls are willing to wear something like that. But Ginny reminds them that they will probably get the chance to serve Ard in a hot outfit, so they are suddenly on board with the idea again. The day of the festival finally arrives, so Ard and Irina are taking their time walking around and checking out all the stands. Technically, they are on patrol in case Lars Al Ghul follows through on his threat, but that doesn't mean they can't have a little fun at the same time. Just then, they see a massive explosion on the other side of the festival, so they go to check it out and find Sylphie harassing a poor innocent man. She is convinced that this man must be a demon, probably because he's bald, and she's about to kill him, but Olivia stops her. The man works at Olivia's favorite restaurant and has been there for years, so she knows for a fact that he's not a demon. It's clear that she lacks the necessary brain cells to be out on patrol, so Olivia tells her to go do something else so she doesn't cause any more trouble. While Sylphie walks away, the three of them stand in the park, and Irina takes a moment to talk about just how amazing this giant tree is. Rumors say that the great sword king Laville sealed something very important beneath this tree, but even the royal family doesn't know what it is. Art is curious, so he asks Olivia if she knows anything about it, and she definitely knows something, but she says she can't discuss it with him. However, there's something else she wants to talk about since there's going to be a sword battle event later today, and she already signed Art up for it, so much to his dismay that he has no choice but to participate. A little while later, Art heads over to his class attraction to see what they are up to, but he's a little concerned by the fact that Ginny named it the Erotic Maid Cafe. Just then, Sylphie comes smashing through the wall because she's chasing a guy who smacked her butt. Art agrees that the guy needs to be punished, but squeezing Sylphie's cheeks doesn't warrant the death penalty, so he uses magic to temporarily hold the dude while he fixes up the wall. Afterwards, he plans on leaving, but the girls plead with him to stay because they only agreed to the maid cafe so they could serve him. Art still sees no reason why he should do it, but then he sees Ginny and he suddenly has two reasons, very big reasons. He takes a seat at a table, and having all these girls fawn over him at the same time is starting to get to him, but all of a sudden, Irina arrives and she can't believe Ginny would do this without calling her first. She wants to be a part of Art's service, but Ginny doesn't think she has the assets necessary to do a good job. However, Irina still insists on being the one to serve Art, so a huge argument begins. Just then, an announcement is made about the battle tournament beginning soon, so Irina and Ginny decide to settle their differences by entering since their last battle got interrupted. The battle tournament finals come around, and Art is up against Olivia. Olivia is excited to finally get a chance to test Art herself, so she's not going to hold back, and Art is seriously scared for his life, so he instinctively uses barrier magic to counter and ends up flinging Olivia out of the ring. Normally this would count as a victory for Art, but this is a sword contest, so Art gets disqualified for using magic. And as for Olivia, she's halfway across the country by now, so she's not going to make it back anytime soon. After that, the play is set to begin and everyone is a bit nervous about going on stage. However, Art is a lot more concerned about how embarrassing it is to be reenacting a glorified version of himself like this. Although, it does make him feel nostalgic because he remembers this particular battle really well, even though it was thousands of years ago. On that day, Art, Lydia, and Sylphie were leading their troops into battle against one of the evil gods, and they were planning to go with their usual strategy, where Art and Lydia would charge ahead while Sylphie stayed behind, but Sylphie really wanted to help this time, so she asked Lydia to let her come along. Unfortunately, Lydia told her to shut up and stop complaining because she didn't want Sylphie screwing up their battle. The final battle was set to happen the following morning, so that night Sylphie went up to Art and asked him if she was really useless to him and Lydia. Art didn't want Sylphie to feel bad, so he explains that both he and Lydia appreciate all the hard work Sylphie put in, but the reason they told her to stay behind is because they didn't want her to get hurt. But if she really wants to help that badly, then he's giving her permission to do whatever she wants as long as she promises to keep herself safe. The next day, after an intense battle, both sides are notably exhausted. However, an evil god still has a trump card up his sleeve and plans to use his magic sword to wipe out all Art's soldiers. But before he could strike, a magic circle suddenly appears beneath his feet, and he explodes. This turns out to have been the work of Sylphie, because last night she spent hours setting up traps all over the battlefield to take out the enemy. Her plan seems to have worked flawlessly, but there's one major problem because she forgot where she put the rest of the landmines, so a bunch of Art's soldiers got blown up as well. Back to the present, the play ended up going pretty well, but Irina thinks it's a bit odd that nothing bad ended up happening even after they received that threatening letter. Just then, she notices that Sylphie isn't here anymore, and that's because she ran into that man again. A lot of time passes and Art is starting to get worried since he hasn't seen Sylphie in a long time, and that's strange behavior for her. Just then, Sylphie shows up and she's definitely acting strange because the first thing she does is tell Art that she wants to meet him out by the holy tree later tonight. Later that night, Ginny and Irina are hiding in the bushes near the tree because they want to see why Sylphie called Art out here so late at night. Ginny is convinced that Sylphie must have developed feelings for Art, but in reality it's the opposite because she's here to kill him. In her hand, She holds the holy sword that once belonged to Lydia, as it has apparently been sealed within the holy tree, and she plans to use it to strike Ard down as revenge for what he did to Lydia. She begins slashing at Ard. He realizes she was serious about trying to kill him, so he tries to fly away, but Sylphie takes to the skies to chase after him. When Sylphie met with Al Ghul earlier, he filled her head with visions of Ard killing Lydia, and after seeing that, she swore to get her revenge by killing Ard. All this is exactly what Al Ghul wanted, as Sylphie strikes Ard in the back and he falls to the ground, but he's not dead yet as he gets back up with his true demon lord form. He can't allow this to go on any longer, so prepares himself to stab Sylphie through the chest to put a stop to her rampage, but at the last second, they both hear Lydia's voice telling them to stop. This snaps Sylphie out of her murderous rage, much to the disappointment of Al Ghul, so it looks like he will have to handle the rest himself. He knocks Sylphie to the ground and explains that he is working towards the revival of the evil gods as well, but as long as Ard was already around, he would never be able to get to Irina, which is why he had hoped to get rid of him by turning Sylphie against him. However, since that failed, he says he's just going to have to do it himself. But I have no idea how he thought he could accomplish that, because Ard is several leagues above him in skill, and doesn't care for Al Ghul the same way he does for Sylphie, so he wastes no time in wiping him off the face of the earth. Then, as Ard goes to pick up Lydia's sword, he hears her voice again, and this time an image of her soul appears before him. Lydia goes over to Sylphie and tells her not to hold a grudge against Ard because it was her own fault that she died. There's no point in seeking revenge, so Lydia just asks Sylphie to live a normal life from now on. Everything goes back to normal after that, and a couple of days later the three are out on a class field trip having fun, but all of a sudden the world freezes and they are transported to another dimension. There they find this otherworldly being who claims to be a true god, and he tells them he has a special request to ask. He summoned them because there is a being threatening to destroy the order of time, so he is sending Ard back in time to deal with it. The three of them then wake up in an open field, and judging by the fact that there are 2 moons in the sky, Ard is convinced that the god really did send them back in time. There were originally 2 moons in the sky, but a certain cataclysmic event caused the destruction of one, so it must mean they are back in ancient times during the rule of Demon Lord Varvatos. Just then, Ard hears a girl screaming, so if he looks over the hill and spots a girl running for her life, she's being chased by a death stingray, and even if he might be interfering with the cannon, Ard can't just stand by and watch her get eaten. He activates an annihilation spell to wipe the thing off the face of the earth, and he was about to leave before anyone realizes that he was responsible for it, but it's already too late. Olivia this time appears, and she thanks him for saving her subordinate. She was quite impressed with the level of power he just displayed, so she asks Ard to join the Demon Lord's army. As of this moment, the only way for Ard and the others to return to their own time is to defeat the being that the god warned them about, and doing that would be a lot easier if they could gain the support of Ard's past self, so Ard agrees to join the army, but only under 2 conditions. First, he wants to have Irina and Ginny in the army, and Olivia is fine with that, but she doesn't think it's a good idea since they probably die the second a threat shows up. Ard is well aware of that, but he assures her that he will personally take care of his friend's safety. As for his second condition, he wants to be stationed in Verda's research corps. Olivia asks him if he's sure that's what he wants because Verda is a bit of a nutcase, but Ard wants to go to the research department because it'll be the least dangerous for Irina and Ginny. A little while later, they arrive at the research department and meet Verda, but Olivia wasn't lying when she said Verda was crazy because the first thing they see her do is blow up her own research lab for fun. A little while after that, Verda rebuilds her lab and greets her new recruits, but she's a bit curious as to why they chose to come here since no one ever willingly works with her. Ard decides to explain the whole time travel mess to her so she can understand the full picture, and Verda is ecstatic at the new discovery because it means she gets to investigate a higher dimensional being. Ard asks for help finding a way back to the future, and Verda agrees to look into it for him, but she's going to need his help with something else in return. Just then, Ard hears a familiar voice, so turns and finds that Lydia is here, and she's really mad at Verda because she's been ignoring her support requests. But Verda doesn't really have any troops to give Lydia, so she suggests that she can take Ard and his friends over here. Lydia has no idea who any of these people are, but she does recognize Double D Milkers when she sees them, so as a woman of culture, she immediately starts trying to seduce Ginny. However, Ard puts a stop to that real quick. Lydia can't believe a random nobody would dare to interrupt her while she was rizzing Ginny up, so she demands a fight, and Ard is all too happy to comply because he needs to knock some sense into her. He and Lydia head outside, and as the fight begins, Ard is easily able to parry all of Lydia's attacks. But Lydia fights dirty, so she picks up a fistful of sand and throws it in Ard's face before punching him straight into a wall. That punch definitely hurt, but Ard is just getting warmed up, so he charges forward and lands a clean blow in Lydia's face. After fighting for a while, the two of them knock each other out, and Lydia now respects Ard quite a bit for being able to take her down. She usually isn't the kind of person to ask for a favor, but she tells Ard she could really use his help out on the battlefield, so she hopes he'll agree to join her on the next mission. Hearing Lydia speak so politely is a jarring experience for Ard, but regarding her request, he says he will do it, but only if Lydia helps him get an audience with Varvatos. Lydia agrees to Ard's terms, but Varvatos is a cautious man, so the best way for Ard to gain his trust is to accomplish something great in battle, and that's exactly what he plans to do. Ard and Lydia may have come to an understanding, but that still hasn't stopped Lydia from assaulting Ginny in the bath. Meanwhile, Ard is in his room, feeling guilty about what he did to Lydia back when he was Varvatos. He killed her with his own 2 hands, so he doesn't have the right to call himself her friend, but then he hears Ginny scream for help because Lydia is trying to grope her melon, so he feels a little less guilty about what he did. A few hours later, everyone has been stationed out on the battlefield, and as part of Verda's team, Ard and the others have been put in the rear guard to help the support team. Ginny and Irina are nervous about being on a real battlefield, but Ard assures them that they'll be fine. Since they are on the rear guard, they probably won't have to fight any enemies, and even if the enemy forces do somehow manage to break through, Ard can handle any threats. Meanwhile, on the front lines, Lydia leads the army's main force to attack the demon castle, but she soon realizes that something is off about this whole thing. The demon army general that's supposed to be stationed here hasn't come out to fight despite all the chaos they're causing, so she's worried he may be plotting something. Just then, she receives a report that the General Bulgan has launched an attack on the rear guard. Bulgan was taking down all the soldiers in his path easily, and he could have easily wiped out the entire rear guard, but then he ran into Ard, and Ard effortlessly scorched him to death with a magic blast. This works out great for Ard, since an achievement of this level is enough to grant him an audience with Varvatos. So after the battle here since finished, Lydia takes him and the others to the capital city so they can meet Varvatos. But before they can even make it to the throne room door, they get a fireball shot at them. The one behind this was one of Varvatos' generals, Alvardo, and Ard was already expecting this because he remembers that Alvardo is a bit of a jackwagon when it comes to welcoming guests. Lydia steps in front of Ard and the others and tells Alvardo they're back off since these 3 are honored guests of the Lord, but Alvardo keeps insisting on attacking Ard regardless. Just then, Varvatos himself comes out because he had heard all the commotion and he's getting sick of Alvardo's antics, so he threatens him to leave before he burns him to a crisp. After Alvardo is gone, Varvatos invites Ard and the others to come into the throne room, and once they're inside, he personally thanks Ard for his great contributions to their army. Ginny and Irina can hardly contain themselves because all their lives they've looked up to the Demon Lord, and even though they've got Ard, this version of him is much cooler. Varvatos doesn't mind them squealing in his presence, however. Varvatos has no idea why they keep calling him the Demon Lord. He has heard of that title before, but it refers to another man, and Ard is incredibly shocked to discover this. After the audience, he returns to Verda's lab to discuss what they know so far, and from what Ard just told her, Verda comes to the conclusion that this timeline must be different from the original in some way, and whoever this new Demon Lord is must have something to do with it. Ginny suggests that it might be a good idea to inform Varvatos of their time-traveling situation, since he might be able to help them, but Ard knows how he'd respond, and there's no way he would believe something like that unless it came from a trusted source. So Ard plans to achieve even greater things so he can earn Varvatos' trust. And as luck would have it, there's another mission, so Ard accompanies Lydia and Sylphie. But when he asks who they will be fighting, he is shocked to hear the name Cursed King Mavelas. When Ard hears the name Mavelas, he freezes in place because Mavelas is the reason he had to kill Lydia in his past life because she got corrupted. He swears to kill Mavelas quickly, so Lydia doesn't have to die in this timeline as well. But to a shock, when they arrive at Mavelas' castle, the entire place is already up in flames and Mavelas has been beheaded. But one responsible for all this is the person known as the Demon Lord of this world. And though he may have helped them by taking down Mavelas, he has no intention of working with them, so he declares war on Varvatos' army. After the Demon Lord's declaration of war on Varvatos' army, a meeting is held to discuss their next move. Naturally, since the Demon Lord declared war, then they're going to have to do the same, so Varvatos says he will be joining them on the battlefield and in 3 days' time they'll go to war. A little while later, Ard heads back to his room and he's starting to worry about the state of this timeline. By now, Lydia had already been poisoned by Mavelas, but in this timeline, the Demon Lord already killed Mavelas. So Lydia is perfectly fine, and honestly, he would like to keep it that way. Just then, the Demon Lord appears in Ard's room and tells him that canon events aren't so easily overwritten, and as things stand, she is doomed to face a horrible death in one way or another. And he knows this because he has experienced it firsthand once before. The Demon Lord then reveals that he is Ard, or at least an alternate version of him. They both lived as Varvatos, lost Lydia, and reincarnated as Ard Meteor. But while our Ard got to live a good life after reincarnating, the Demon Lord suffered loss after loss until his entire existence was nothing but pain. The Demon Lord was brought here by the same god that brought Ard, so he wants to use this opportunity to make up for his greatest mistake and save Lydia's life. But to stop her from meeting her inevitable canon event, he must become this world's #1 enemy and be slain by Lydia to make her a hero. This will be his final act of atonement, and since he and Ard both live the same life as Varvatos, he knows you must feel the same way, so he asks for his help in achieving this goal. Ard wants to do whatever it takes to make sure Lydia survives, but at the same time he is hesitant to sacrifice everything he has gained, so he doesn't know what to do. The Demon Lord can understand why Ard would be hesitant, so he says he will give him some time to think it over and asks Ard to meet him in 3 days at the ruins once he has made up his mind. A little while later, Latimer comes to call Ard down for lunch, and while they walk down the halls, Ard says he has something to ask her. He asks if she's been serving Lydia for a long time now, so Latimer answers that she's been a maid here for almost her entire life, and Lady Lydia is incredibly important to her. Ard asks what she would do if she found out that Lydia was in danger, but Latimer cares about Lydia more than she cares about herself, so it goes without saying that she would do whatever it takes to save Lydia. Ard soon arrives at the dining hall where everyone is having their meal, but Lydia can tell that something is bothering him, so she invites him to come have some fun with her, and she's still technically his superior, so Ard is not allowed to refuse. She takes Ard out for a fun day in town, but her idea of fun involves getting down and dirty with the first girl she finds, so she and Ard just end up disagreeing and fighting until they are both exhausted on the floor. This is exactly why Ard hates going out with Lydia, but on the bright side, fighting Lydia managed to cheer him up a little. She asks him if he's ready to talk about what's bothering him now, so Ard tells her that someone important to him is destined to die, and he's not sure whether he should risk everything to save this person or not. Lydia understands what Ard is feeling, so she says she has something she wants to show him and takes Ard to the ruined city, where she committed her greatest sin. The souls of the people Lydia murdered here soon emerged from the ground solely to torment her for what she has done, so she was on to explain what happened. This used to be a peaceful demon city, and it had been neutral during the war, but it was a vital stronghold, so Lydia needed to capture it. The locals understandably didn't want to lose their village to the human army, so they tried to fight back, and in response, Lydia murdered every single villager here, men, women, and children alike. She tried to justify herself by saying the people she killed were just demons, but she still regrets her actions to this day. That's why she has decided that she will bring peace to this world as one of its heroes, and once that's done, she will die a pitiful, miserable death. This is the choice she made to atone for her sins, so she doesn't want anyone to save her when the time comes for her to die. The day of the battle finally arrives, and everyone has begun to advance to defeat the Demon Lord's army. However, Ard is nowhere to be found, and Sylphie is pissed off about that he ditched them. Lydia tells her not to worry because she's sure Ard has a good reason for not being here, but just to be safe, she's going to go look for him. Meanwhile, Ard meets with the Demon Lord of the Ruins, and in regards to his proposition, he has finally decided on his answer. It is true that he wants to save Lydia, but he doesn't think that's the right thing to do here, since Lydia doesn't want to be saved. She wants to die to create a world full of peace and prosperity, so Ard has no right to take her wish away from her. The Demon Lord thinks it's unfortunate that Ard won't join him, but since that's the case, then they're going to have to fight until only one remains. The Demon Lord begins his attack by casting an incineration laser beneath Ard, and when he dodges it, he gets hit with a ton of similar circles in the air, but they're easy enough for Ard to dispel. Ard then counterattacks with a gravity field spell, but the Demon Lord is able to dispel the spell as well, so it looks like these two are at a stalemate, but the Demon Lord came prepared for such a situation. Back at the villa, Irina and Ginny were left behind because the battle was too dangerous for them. But all of a sudden Latimer comes up to them and says that Ard has a special mission for the two of them. Irina and Ginny are just glad to have something to do, so they believe Latimer and follow her out into the forest. There, Latimer explains that the Demon Lord has a form of immortality accomplished by separating his soul from the body. A person can only die when both their soul and their body are damaged at the same times, so she says Ard needs them to sneak into the Demon Lord's castle and release the Demon Lord's soul to undo his immortality. They do as they are told and eventually locate the Demon Lord's soul, but when they attempt to destroy it, they get caught in a trap and are tied up. This whole thing was part of the Demon Lord's plan, and even shows Art a live video feed of the girls trapped in his basement, before asking him once more to join him in saving Lydia. Art asks what will happen to Irina and Ginny if he doesn't listen to him, but the Demon Lord once had an Irina and Ginny of his own, so he isn't going to hurt them. This is his way of giving Art an excuse to go against Lydia's wishes and save her. However, the Demon Lord's plan fails because Lydia shows up at the castle to rescue Ginny and Irina, and with her strength, she's easily able to wipe out every demon in there, as well as destroy the Demon Lord's soul vessel. Now the Demon Lord has lost all of his insurance policies, but he still asks Art one last time if he's willing to join him in saving Lydia, but Art's answer hasn't changed. Besides, he knows how the Demon Lord thinks, so he's aware that the real reason the Demon Lord is trying so hard to save Lydia is because he wants to rid himself of the guilt of killing her by dying in her place. And while that may be true, the Demon Lord sees nothing wrong with wanting to save Lydia, even if it is ultimately for a selfish reason. And since they can't agree on the right thing to do, he and Art both summon their swords to duel each other to the death. The Demon Lord has Art in a bad position and is about to stab him through his chest. But all of a sudden, the soul of Lydia appears and starts holding him back because this isn't what she wants. And that interference was all Art needed, so he takes the opportunity to stab the Demon Lord through the chest. The Demon Lord's body vanishes after he dies, and since Art has completed the mission that God gave him, it looks like his body is going to vanish from this timeline as well. The same thing happens to Irina and Ginny, so Lydia realizes they must be going back to their time. She had heard about them being time travelers from Verda, and before they go, there's something she wants to ask. Her only goal is to pave the way for a peaceful future, so she wants to know if the future they live in is truly peaceful. Irina and Ginny assure Lydia that the future is amazing. There are a few threats here and there, but overall it's a great time to be alive, and Lydia played a huge part in building that world, so they are grateful to her. Ard, Irina, and Ginny then disappear from this timeline and wake up back in their bus seats, almost as if they never left. But they vividly remember everything that happened during their trip to the past, and they are relieved to be back home. That brings the season to an end. Thanks for watching. Want more anime recaps? Subscribe the channels and turn on notification bell.